And in the first rooms that I was in of people who were dying, I was like, wow, I just said all of the same things that I say at a birth. Just breathe. It's okay. Let's just sit here and be with it. It's the same feelings in my body. And what I have often said when I'm teaching death work is that I feel like I got my training in midwifery school. Not the clinical stuff. I'm not taking blood pressures, or suturing, but the presence that I bring into the room where there's death and grief is the same presence that I bring to the birth room.
Hi, my name is Augustine Colebrook, and I'm the principal at Midwifery Wisdom Collective. I speak on this podcast about big picture political issues and the future of our profession.
Hey y'all, I am Jamara, and I'm a midwife. I'm also a birth justice activist, and this season I am looking forward to sharing stories of Black midwives and the communities they serve.
Hello, beloved birth community. I'm Angela Love, nurse midwife since 2004, preceptor, and mother. I have a home birth practice called Midwife Love and a national telehealth practice called Midwife RX. My mission is to keep birth choices available and to educate the next generation of midwives for our daughters and grandchildren. Matriarchy now.
I'm Layla Wyatt. I get to share with you the voices of student midwives from across the country and beyond. This season, we focus on those students who just graduated, are about to sit for the NARM, or did yesterday, and we get tips and tricks for you for what happens at the end of the student midwife journey.
Hi, Dani. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Augustine.
Digitally.
Totally.
Yeah, well, here we are. Well, thank you for agreeing to be a guest here with us at Midwifery Wisdom. We're so excited to hear everything you have to say. I know that you're a wealth of knowledge and wisdom, and you've got a retreat coming up and all kinds of goodies. But let's start with your history and your introduction. Will you tell us a little bit about where you came from, where you're going, who you are, where you are, all those things?
I would love to tell you those things. So my journey started with midwifery since I was 14 years old. I knew I wanted plants, herbal medicine, and I didn't know, that was my first sort of plug into the midwifery world, was just knowing that I wanted to work with herbal medicine, but not feeling like I wanted to be with sick people. And I didn't know like how those things connected. And I had an experience helping a friend who was having a miscarriage. I was 18 and we were hiking and she started bleeding. And
wow,
we just sat together and it just felt really right and really peaceful. And I felt really confident. And at the end of it, she looked at me and she said, "You should be a midwife." And I was like, "What's that?" I knew that from books as a child, but I didn't know that midwife was a thing that you could do. Right. And that's pretty much all I've done ever since. I went to Maternidad La Luz in El Paso in the 90s. And
I know that scene, yeah.
That's a pretty great scene. It was wild back then. Took the NARM, had a bunch of my own kids, and then started practicing in Arizona in 2008. And I've just been here ever since, doing home birth, out of hospital birth, sometimes a lot, sometimes a little. And then it happened where I attended my first stillbirth as the provider. That had happened in school, but it was the first time that I was the one in charge. I'm using air quotes, and there wasn't a preceptor midwife there. That was like, I could be like, oh, okay, you deal with it. It was my turn to deal with it. And I remember being with this mama and listening for heart tones, and I wasn't listening anymore. I was listening to find my words of what the heck I was going to say. And I felt not prepared. I was prepared medically and legally, like I knew what I needed to do. But I think I identified as a midwife to my community, like that I was going to show up in birth and death and marriages and, to honor the young women. And I saw myself that way, even though I was a really young midwife at the time. And so it was, that's a whole story of really my journey into being a midwife who also educates about death. Because I made so many mistakes, Augustine, trying to do a good job for that family, trying to protect them from what was going on, thinking that that was the role that we played as a friend, was to protect our friends from pain. And I didn't know any better. And so I made a lot of mistakes, and that's okay, because I've learned from them and they've propelled me forward. Like for example, I remember trying to get a brigade of people to go to their house and hide all the baby stuff so that when they came back from the hospital, they wouldn't have to deal with it. Like such a natural impulse in me of caring. And now, 14 years later, I know the folly in that. So where I am now is I've spent some time running a national nonprofit that educates about end of life, specifically a family's right to care for their own loved one after death. When I was in the hospital with the family who had that stillbirth, I had this overwhelming sensation that they needed to bring the baby's body home. And I was like, what? Is that sane? Is that legal? Is that safe? I've never heard of that before, but I felt it. And then I came to find out that there's a whole national movement to really remind people that spending time with the body of the deceased is really important. So I've really dedicated my life to both things, to making sure that people know that that's possible, and also having home births. Yeah.
How amazing. What an intersectionality of multiple knowledge bases and experiences. And I love that you've spent time at this national organization. Is it okay if you share the name and how people can find out more?
Definitely. So the organization calls the National Home Funeral Alliance. And their mission is to educate families and communities about their right to care for their own loved ones after death. The website is an amazing resource to connect with how to interpret the laws. And really what it does is it empowers folks to understand the language in the law that allows people to act as their own funeral director. And so it's a great resource. There's lots of local organizations in individual states here in the States, and also like in the UK and all over Europe. There's a lot of motion in that movement as well.
Wow. Yeah. Well, so your first inspiration to learn or understand more about this was that stillbirth. Did you go on and become a resource for folks in your community who were holding home funerals or taking their loved ones' bodies home? Or have you mostly stayed at the national level, or have you served in your community as well?
That's really interesting. So my first entrance into the work became the national organization. I had a friend who was on the board, and she was the person I found who was like, no, you can do that. You can take bodies home. It's amazing. And so I got a lot of my personal education by serving on the board of directors, but there was an element of it that was really unsatisfying for me because my heart is in community. And so
it's a little removed.
Yeah. And there's something about specifically something like death care that is so individual to someone's family culture, to someone's culture of origin, and really to the community that they live in. And so on a national level, we were able to say, this is what's possible, but really the work is done in the grassroots, is done person to person. And so I really left working on the national front to start my own local organization here in Arizona that's called Arizona Community Death Care. And so we've just taken really the work of the national umbrella and made it super specific to the Arizona laws, and then trying to create little bubbles of smaller groups working together to really do the work of supporting folks who are going through end of life and wanting to meet it without the loneliness, without the isolation, without having to be your own advocate all the time, all of those things that can be really exhausting when you're trying to grieve and to grieve well. So yeah, I've really pulled myself out of the national world so that I can work as locally as possible. What I've learned as a midwife.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
it's really beautiful. I bet your community is getting so much.
And it's manifested, for me, the direct line in was always the home funeral piece, was the spending time with bodies piece, the slowing down, the way that it supports the nervous system to integrate the new reality and grieve well. But it's become so many other things. It's become, single folks who have cancer and people are plugged in. And so there's rides to chemo. There's meal trains. There's folks to come and be with you after surgery. And so it doesn't all have to fall on one person. This idea of community death care has become more than just being about death, but really about just supporting people through transitions and hard times. Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. Midwifery for all stages. Well, so our listeners might be familiar with two terms that kind of get used in this world, death midwives and death doulas. Can you tell us how you feel about those titles and where they fit into this landscape?
Definitely. So I know there has been controversy of death midwives using the term midwife. There was a lawsuit, I believe, in Canada some years ago. There's so many levels. To me, for myself, for my work, I love the idea of full spectrum care. And my entry to midwifery was so much about wanting to be that full spectrum midwife, to show up and do well care and welcome in the young women into their moon time and show up for death. And I understand that that's not right for everybody's midwifery. Death midwifery and death doulas are not medical providers in the way that midwives are responsible for healthcare. So I know that the language gets really tricky. Oftentimes, midwives and doulas on the death side are more volunteers.
It's a little muddy, right?
Yeah, it can be really muddy, especially when we're viewing it from a capitalist model of trying to define everybody's role and make sure everybody stays in their wheelhouse and gets compensated properly. Those are really important questions from that mindset, and to me, less important from a community mindset. I always tell people, when there's a death, people just show up based on their skill set and based on their comfort level. And in my experience, the midwives, the birth midwives, are usually also the ones who are comfortable to show up and wash the body of the grandfather who died at 101 years old, because we're used to being in those places where there's fluids and smells and just the rawness of life. And to me, that's where the connection comes together. And those are the spaces that I'm really interested in cultivating. You mentioned the workshop and retreat. So
midwives work on in the threshold, right? Between
exactly
the worlds. And so it would make sense that we can easily come there for folks transiting the veil the other direction. It's such an interesting thing. I really appreciate you making the distinction that the death doula or death midwife title is a non-clinical title. And I think that's a really important. And so if we were to then go into the clinical aspects of death care, end of life care, sometimes it's an oncologist, sometimes it's hospice, sometimes it's a palliative care physician, right? Who else participates in the clinical roles?
I think you've got it. I mean, hospice would be, nurses, nurse practitioners, palliative care folks, exactly the people that you've mentioned. Those, and a lot of times if someone's dying on hospice, a lot of the medical aspect is taken away, and we're really just doing pain management.
Right.
And so a death midwife or a death doula is really showing up to do more emotional and spiritual support, logistical support for the family, helping to create ceremony and ritual. And again, just like at birth, sometimes a doula's only job is to sit there and shake their head and say, yep, this is normal. Yep, you're afraid, but this is okay. This is what this looks like. And in the first rooms that I was in of people who are dying, I was like, wow, I just said all of the same things that I say at a birth. Just breathe. It's okay. Let's just sit here and be with it. It's the same feelings in my body. And what I have often said when I'm teaching death work is that I feel like I got my training in midwifery school. Not the clinical stuff. I'm not taking blood pressures, or suturing, but the presence that I bring into the room where there's death and grief is the same presence that I bring to the birth room.
Wow. Well, so let's extrapolate now for our listeners and anyone who's listening and wants to know more or wants to go deeper or has been to their first, unexpected perinatal loss and is like, gosh, what do I need to know? How do I need to do this better? Where should they start? What do you recommend? What are some tips?
Yeah. One of the first things, for me, there's two avenues in this, right? One avenue has so much to do with the way that we companion someone through their grief, trusting that it can get ugly, that it can be uncomfortable, that there's nothing to change or fix, that grief can be loud, it can be dark, it can be scary. You can worry if this person's ever going to come around and want to be alive again.
And these are the surviving members.
The surviving members. And so how do you be a companion to those survivors and not try to tell them everything's going to be okay or they're in a better place, but really, and just like birth, like if it was your first birth, you might be like, whoa, they're making lots of noises. How do I trust that there's an end to this and it's going to be okay? But then you go to 300 births and you're like, oh yeah, this is what this looks like. And then the other thing happens and the baby comes and everything's fine. And there's a similarity with grief where you know that it gets darker and that it gets deeper, and that if you don't try to fix it, it has a cycle that it moves through and people get changed. And so there's a way that I think as midwives who might end up in that room, that we cultivate a trust of the grief process, of allowing the misery, of allowing the darkness, of finding a way to be comfortable in those spaces and just draw it out rather than quiet it, just like we might do at a birth. So really spending some time thinking about how might I move differently in that space with the confidence. The other piece for me really is how we facilitate families to get to spend more time with the body of the baby who died. The thing that I grapple with the most, that I love to talk to midwives about, because I think everybody has a different opinion, is how do we bring it up? Because you can't, I have found it to be very hard when a death happens and no one's ever heard of it before to bring a baby home. And you can't be like, so your baby just died, and I just want to talk to you about this crazy concept of let's advocate for bringing the baby home from the hospital, because in that moment, they're so shocked. They can't
Yeah.
process
Yeah,
or
yeah.
shouldn't need to process this new information. And so to me, as we feed communities, normalizing the idea of spending time with bodies, whether it's, grandma who died in the hospital and bringing grandma's body home. And the more people have heard that story, it's not such a huge leap then if there's been a stillbirth
Yeah.
or a neonatal death, that they're not hearing it
Yeah.
for the first time. And I think there's something really important about that, because what I've seen for
Yeah.
families,
Yeah. And yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, what I've seen for families who've lost babies is it's this idea, and this isn't my term, that you need to say hello before you say goodbye. And that's from Elizabeth Hyndman's book, Ghost
I was
Belly.
just about to say, yeah, Ghost Belly is one of the best resources for learning what that looks like. I've interviewed her as well, and she's an incredible writer and thinker
Yes.
and speaker, and like just such a tremendous resource. If you haven't yet, I think all midwives should read Ghost Belly. I think it's an incredible treatise on what could happen afterwards, and also what could happen. Yeah, it's a fantastic novel, which is really a memoir, which is, I don't know, what do you call it? It's
Definitely a
so
memoir.
gripping. You can't put it down. It's so fascinating
Definitely.
story.
Yep. And that's
Yeah,
required reading
Ghost
for
Belly.
all of the classes that I teach for
Yeah.
midwives, and just for holding space, for any birth worker. That's definitely required reading for my classes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think it really for the whole community. We have an interview with her. Well, she's part of a collection of folks. We talk to midwives and mothers who've lost babies at home births. And we put together this whole process on perinatal fetal demise and community-based birth, and what to do and how to do it based on the people who've experienced it. And so we'll link that video to this show notes so people can get those resources. But yeah, she was in there, and the clips of her describing what she went through was just it's so moving and it's so powerful. And the other two mothers who present their stories in that video also very powerful. And what gets to happen in community-based birth is so different than what happens in the hospital. And so I think midwives in community-based birth are the best position to be able to advocate for this really cultural shift. Are there any states where it's not legal, where midwives can't advocate for spending more time with the baby's body?
So there is not a state where it is not legal to care for a body at home. Some states do have some hoops that you need to jump through, where there needs to be funeral director supervision. But I think at this time there's like 9, and it's like New York, Connecticut. And there is a list on my website of all of them. I don't have them all off the top of my head,
Okay.
but only
Great,
9, but
great,
only
great.
9 states. Every other state, your right to act as your own funeral director is protected, which is pretty fantastic.
Awesome. Don't you wish we had the
Yeah.
right to act as your own midwife in some of these states? Why can't we get more freedom in birth when we, look at it? But that is fantastic, and a tremendous knowledge. So tell us about your website and your resources. What are you doing for this movement right now, not just in your own community, but for courses and workshops and retreats? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so my website is Arizona Community Death Care, azcommunitydeathcare.com. And you can find me through there. I have traveled, other states to teach. I do a lot of work in Utah and in Idaho, just because we're all close together. I've taught some in Santa Fe. People can definitely get me to go different places to teach. I can do things online. I am hosting a retreat for midwives in Sedona in March, with my friend Jade Scherer, who is a Vision Quest leader. And so this I've never done before, but we're trying to really hold this container for 5 days to learn the death care piece, to really dive into that companioning and being with grief, the creating ritual, and really understanding the somatic aspect of nervous system regulation when there is a body present in the room. That's a big element of my work, is understanding exactly what's happening in the nervous system when the time and space is created by the presence of the body. So holding those pieces along with Jade's 20 years of experience in just guiding vision quests. And so really holding the tender places in midwives who have attended loss and are still bruised, even though we move on. And so we're really hoping to tend both parts, resource that broken heart.
That's amazing.
Walking distance from beautiful Oak Creek, Cathedral Rock. I also, my other hat is catering, so beautiful, locally grown meals and just a really well-tended experience. But really, the thing, going back a little bit, I hope so. And then, we'll just keep making things like that happen. The piece, though, going back to the individual states that I think is the most important, is understanding that every community is different. And what's right in your community, what's needed in my community might be really, really different. But for midwives, if I could do one thing, it would be to help midwives understand which organizations and institutions and, bureaucrats they need to befriend, to understand, to network with, so that when there is a loss, when there is a death, this isn't the first time we're having these conversations. So because I've been doing this work for a long time, I've worked with the ethics board at my hospital, and they know I'm here, and they know if there's a death, my name might come up and people are going to be asking for bodies. And now my hospital has a protocol on how to release bodies to families, because even though it was legal, if the hospital doesn't have a policy for it, it's not happening. And so how do we make sure that the things are in place?
Yeah, it makes me think of the need for midwives to go do in-services with EMS, right? Is if there's you could call them if you have an emergency, but they don't know what they're doing unless you work together before you're in the emergency. So, going and doing those in-services and showing videos and talking about cord prolapse and talking about, what you're doing in a resuscitation and how NRP is different than CPR. And these kinds of things is so important. Otherwise you end up with that crisis in that moment. And so I love this parallel of needing to go and lay the groundwork before you need it. That's just brilliant. And you have a resource of who that is in your communities.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's taken a long time to figure out who those people are and make those connections and get them to give me the time of day. But that's what community building is. You stay the course, you make the connections, you keep showing up. Then one day those people need you and they realize that you can help. So I have friends in hospice, I have friends in palliative care, friends on the ethics committee at the hospital, friends in labor and delivery. And that's just been years and years of staying in one place, setting down my roots and talking my talk, walking my walk, and showing up.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow, what a resource you are. My God, I'm so glad we know about you and we get to share. Will you tell us a story? Will you tell us a little bit about an experience that was really impactful for you working with a family who did bring a baby home and what that's like?
Let me think of a good one. What I love to share too is that a lot of my work ends up being that I'm not the one there. And so this will weave in, but right. So we have to be careful in these movements, right? Because it feels really great to like, oh, and then I came in and I made all this beauty and then I lit the, and really being careful to take our, like the way that we tell stories. I think every midwife has heard this one at some point, that like our goal is that a woman tells her birth story and that we're not in it, that we did our job so well that like they forgot we were there. So my favorite stories of any time a family is taking care of a body is, a lot of times I've done enough education beforehand that I'm not coming to help out, that I don't love the word empowered, but that I've helped them to see what the laws are, what the rules are, what the tasks are, and then they do it themselves. So I got a call from a family. They were not my clients, and their baby had died, and they didn't know better. So they called the authorities, and the authorities came, and the funeral director showed up and took the body away. And then they realized through their midwife that it was possible for them to spend time with the body. They actually lived on a big enough farm that they could bury the body on their land. So they called the funeral director and they said, hey, we want our baby back. And he was like, well, I can't give you your baby back. And there was like kind of this back and forth, like, but we were told that we could. And the funeral director was like, no, it's actually not legal in Arizona to see an unembalmed body. And so that's when I got, then okay, that's not actually true. And so for me, my role, again, I think the advocacy, while it's not as fun as creating the beauty, is the role that I end up playing. So I was on the phone with the funeral director. Yeah. I was on the phone with the state board of funeral director, the person who holds their licenses. And she actually was like, yeah, no, it's not legal for a family to see an unembalmed body. I said, okay, how about I hang on and you go find that statute for me? Because I was like, I teach a lot and it'd be really good for me to have that statute number. So rather than telling her she was wrong, one of the amazing tactics of advocacy is to tell them they're right and then ask them to give you the information so you could share it. So she came back 10 minutes later and said, oh, actually, I'm not right. That's not actually what it says. It says that the public, that you can't, have a public viewing of a body without being embalmed, like, at the courthouse or something like that. So she did a quick 180 and agreed with me that, of course, that funeral director could not hold the family's body, the baby's body. And she was willing actually to call the funeral director for me and let him know that his license was actually in jeopardy if he was holding the body hostage. And so he quickly turned around and drove the body back out to the family's farm, where they then were able to keep the baby for 30 days while they went through the process of having a family cemetery approved for their land. It's basically a 30-day process here in the rural parts of Arizona. So we were able not only to advocate for them getting their baby's body back so that she had days to hold the baby and just really feel like that little person was part of her family, but then the advocacy continued because it freaks people out. What do you mean you had the body for that long? They were able to just keep the body in the freezer, which sounds shocking, but if a body is held in a funeral home, it's the exact same thing. And got through all of the levels of paperwork with the county, got the home cemetery approved, and then they were able to have a beautiful funeral on their farm and put the baby's body in the ground where they'll be forever. It was lovely.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and it is so confronting when you're not regularly in this world and talking about this. And one of the things that, again, I love about Elizabeth Heinemann's work is she describes about the baby cooler box so that she could have it for multiple days. And the baby's body could be kept at that lower temperature to arrest the decomposition process so that it could, look like her baby for longer. And I just think it's so important for midwives to know about these resources. It might not be something that we have ever even thought about because death is so removed from the family and from the home. What are some other things that you now know that you want midwives to know about home funerals or taking the bodies home, or about the whole first few weeks, like just the nitty gritty? Like, I think, I worked with a family whose baby was very bruised. And I think they weren't prepared for that. And so that's something that I wish I had known. It's like, a baby who is a stillborn and goes through the birth process still sometimes, or not still, they end up bruised because they don't have the circulatory system to heal that. And so, you know what I mean? Like those are the kinds of things that I think midwives want to know about. What else?
So babies' bodies are so fragile. And pretty quickly it can go from looking like their baby to not looking like their baby. Something that's really powerful to remember is that it's not just about sight, but it's about the feeling and it's about the weight. And so it's okay to shroud a baby and cover their face and maybe just the hand is out. Really allowing like whichever part of the body still looks best, to maybe the feet still look well, but the face, because of the trauma of birth and moving through the bones. And so you move the baby, you shroud the baby, which basically is like a swaddle blanket for that size, but maybe you leave the little feet out. And so, so they have a really, a lasting memory of just holding those little toes. And having that creativity to work with what works, with what works for that family. Some people can handle seeing that, and to really just normalize that it's okay if it's the right person. To me, it was radical the first time I heard somebody say this, and then I had to integrate it. But like, it's okay to see decomposition. It's okay. That doesn't mean it's okay for everyone, but to just even start to feel into the possibility that that's not wrong, that that's not just because there's a bruise or there's a tear in the skin. That is part of the truth. And so how do we hold someone through the challenge of that, rather than, again, needing to make it pretty, needing to fix it? For some people, that is what's needed. And it's okay to have a baby embalmed and then bring them home for 3 days. That is absolutely an option. It will change things. There's a little bit of a chemically feel when you kiss them. But if somebody really wants that perfect visual, an embalming is absolutely a viable option. And then the complete other end of the spectrum is the person who says, my baby went through this, my baby is going through this, and for me, I want to bear witness to exactly what the truth of it is. And then everywhere in between. We talk about that sometimes, not in the context of babies, but like car accidents, and somebody could have had some real physical trauma, an adult, and you still want to bring their body home and have that presence. And so you work again with creative draping. You identify, like we always say, who's the person in your community who can bear to see the body with some trauma, and do some cleaning up and do some fixing and do some draping, and then inviting in the other people who maybe want a little bit less of a visual. Normalizing the experience for me is part of it. And that doesn't need to be where everybody is at. Yeah.
It's beautiful truth. I mean, you know, if we're going to look at birth in all of its messy glory, we can look at death the same way. It's really quite revolutionary, and also totally, you know, banal as well. It's
I mean, right? There's no
the full
reason
spectrum of human experience.
there's no reason that it shouldn't just be a part of it, you know? Just like we don't want to go into the room anymore.
We've lived in this culture now that numbs and mutes and hides, and, you know, for decades now.
Yeah.
Image is the driver, and we are heroing everyone around us, trying to protect everyone around us. But that protection ends up robbing them of the experience.
Yes. And I think that that's a big element in the funeral industry. I have a lot of friends who are funeral directors, and even, you know, the woman on the phone with the baby story, she's like, oh, well, I just wouldn't want them to see that. I just wouldn't want that to be their last memory, you know, the baby's skin. And I was like, okay, but that's not your choice to make for them. And it's, you know, it's like thinking about the way that birth used to be. Is like you go in the room and you get wheeled back out all tidied up with your makeup on, and nobody saw, you know, what you just went through, because you went in with your makeup on and you came out with your makeup on.
And there's a little bundle, a wrapped up bundle, like, ta-da, the stork brought it.
Yeah, and we do the same thing with death. It's like somebody dies, you know, within the hour, the funeral director whisks them away. The next time you see the body is all tidy in their casket, and everybody just goes about their
makeup
business.
and
Exactly.
jewelry and whatever. Yeah.
And so I think
it's a profound reclaiming.
And I really, you know, what it can do for our nervous systems to have the time to assimilate the new truth is powerful. So you can have the body at home, sit with the body, leave and go for a walk, make a meal, you know, play catch with the dog, then come back in and read poetry and play your guitar alongside the dead body. And then it feels overwhelming and our systems get really activated. And then you go for a walk and you eat some food and you take a nap. And, you know, sometimes when there's a death, you know, the hospital, oh, you have 2 hours, you know, you can stay here. And then there's all of a sudden this frantic, like, scarcity of time. Everybody wants a few minutes alone, and I need to go pee, but I'm afraid I'm going to leave. And then they're going to take the body away if nobody's in, like, that angsty feeling of needing to quick make something of the moment and feel the right things and do the right things at the right moment in this compressed amount of time. But when we bring a body home, whether it's a baby or a grandma, and spend 3 days, for example, the unraveling happens. The natural ceremonies and rituals that occur in reaction to, rather than to try to make a feeling, but you have times to feel the feeling, notice what the feeling is asking for, and then meet it, and then notice it change, and then meet it again. We don't get that when the funeral is scheduled for, 3:00 on Thursday, and we got to get in our stockings and put our makeup on and show up. Like, I want to grieve in my pajamas.
Yeah.
I need a break to take a walk. And
I want to sleep and then wake up and figure it out tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah. And notice that it's different.
And notice that it's different, that it's an integration process. It's making me think of the difference between natural contractions and oxytocin and pitocin induction. Like, you need the pause, you need the break, you need the breath. There needs to be a space between the pain.
Yeah.
And if it's that rushed, pressured, other people's timelines, image focus culture, you don't have the break between, you don't have the space between the pain, the contraction pain.
Yeah, I
the
love
brief
that. I've
pain.
never put that together like that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, you've just filled up my heart. Thank you so much, Dani. I'm really grateful to you to be not only willing to speak with us, but just in your life, be willing to be an advocate and sit in the threshold like this. My gosh.
Yeah, and
we're all grateful.
It's such a gift to be with you. I will say that you can find me on my website. My phone number's there. Like, I've gotten phone calls from other states of people saying, like, I know I took your class and this is what you said, and now the hospice nurse is saying I have to call the funeral director. Can you talk to her? And I'm on the phone with the hospice nurse, like,
in some random state.
Random state. So I'm
Yeah.
here. I can plug you in with the people in your state. Like, reach out. I'm here. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And they can find out more information about your workshop in March for people that are still trying to heal their heart or discover this process.
Definitely.
And that's on your website,
azcommunitydeathcare.org.
Community. Okay. azcommunitydeathcare.org. We'll link it in the show notes as well.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Dani. And I can't wait to see what else is a future project and plan. And we're hoping to attract you to speak at this year's Midwifery Wisdom Conference and all kinds of things. I can't wait to share you far and wide.
Yes. Well, I can't wait to be in the same room with you and have a glass of wine.
Yeah. Someday soon, right? We're going to make this happen.
Perfect.
Lots of love, my friend. It's so fantastic. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Take good care of yourself.
You too.